The Bounty Guild operated in that fascinating gray zone between legitimate law enforcement and organized crime, which was exactly where it preferred to be. Across 73 sectors of colonized space, the Guild maintained licensed hunters who tracked down fugitives, recovered stolen property, and generally performed the jobs that official authorities found too expensive, too dangerous, or too politically inconvenient to handle themselves. It was a system that worked beautifully for everyone involved, assuming you defined worked as generated profit, and everyone as people who weren't being hunted. The Guild Hall on Obsidian Station represented the organization's commitment to professional standards, which meant it looked slightly less like a criminal enterprise and slightly more like a corporate office that happened to smell like weapon discharge and poor life choices. The main floor featured digital boards displaying active bounties, their values, and their current claim status. Private booths lined the walls where hunters could negotiate contracts, compare notes, or conduct business that definitely wasn't happening if anyone official asked. The central space held tables where hunters gathered between jobs, sharing war stories that grew more impressive with each retelling and each drink. The population, at any given moment, represented a cross-section of species that had decided violence for profit was their calling. Arthaxians with their crystalline exoskeletons sat near Velthorian hunters, whose adaptive camouflage flickered occasionally. A cluster of Corvin pack hunters occupied their usual corner, their collective consciousness sharing information faster than individual thought. The Guild prided itself on being an equal opportunity employer in the sense that anyone could hunt bounties regardless of species, gender, or moral flexibility, as long as they followed the rules and paid their dues. The rules were simple. Register your claims, resolve disputes according to Guild protocols, and don't kill other hunters unless they really deserved it. That last one had some flexibility built in. Enter Raxith the Relentless, and yes, he'd given himself that title because subtlety wasn't really his species' strong suit. The Thularian stood nearly 9 feet tall when he bothered to stand fully upright, which he did specifically to intimidate people because that's what 9 feet of predatory muscle was for. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where everything tried to kill everything else, leading to natural selection favoring creatures that were very good at killing first. Thularians came equipped with 4 arms, each ending in hands capable of crushing Duras steel, plus a set of retractable venomous spines along their forearms that could paralyze most species within seconds. Their hide was thick enough to stop most small arms fire. Their reflexes were excellent, and their temperament was what psychologists diplomatically called aggressively territorial. Raxith had been hunting bounties for 12 years, claiming over 200 successful captures with a methodology that favored intimidation and overwhelming force over nuance. His reputation preceded him into every guild hall he entered, which was exactly how he liked it. Other hunters learned to avoid his claimed targets, knowing that disputes with Raxith tended to end poorly for everyone except Raxith. He approached the claims board with the swagger of someone who owned the space, his massive frame parting the crowd like a ship through water. The bounty he was interested in appeared on the board 3 minutes ago. Kelvin Thrace, wanted for embezzlement, fraud, and murdering 2 people who discovered his embezzlement and fraud. Current location, somewhere in the outer reaches. Bounty value, 85,000 credits, dead or alive. Raxith placed his palm on the claim scanner, officially registering his intent to pursue the target. The board updated immediately, showing his name as primary claimant. Standard guild protocol meant other hunters had 12 hours to file counterclaims if they believed they had prior tracking rights, after which the bounty became his exclusive property. "That one's going to be fun," he announced to nobody in particular and everyone in general. Thrace has been running for 3 weeks. Probably thinks he's clever hiding in the reaches. Going to enjoy teaching him otherwise. The other hunters within earshot offered the appropriate responses. Some nodded, Some raised drinks in acknowledgement. Most simply accepted that another lucrative bounty had been claimed by someone they'd rather not compete with. The guild hall's entrance opened with a pneumatic hiss that announced new arrivals. Most hunters didn't bother looking up because people came and went constantly. Raxith noticed only because the figure who entered moved with the kind of purposeful efficiency that marked someone on business rather than socializing. Human female, maybe 5'7" lean build that suggested functional strength rather than bulk. She wore practical tactical pants with too many pockets, a dark fitted jacket over a gray shirt, and boots that had seen actual use. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid, her face showed no expression beyond mild interest, and she carried herself with the casual confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were going. She went directly to the claims board, studied it for maybe 10 seconds, then turned to scan the room. Her eyes found Raxith, which wasn't difficult given his size, and she walked toward him with the same efficient movement. "You just claimed the Thrace bounty," she said without preamble. Not a question, a statement. Raxith looked down at her, which required actually looking down, given the height difference. "That's what the board says. Problem. Filing a counterclaim. I've been tracking Thrace for 6 days, have current intelligence on his location, and established pursuit before you entered this station." The conversations around them quieted as other hunters sensed developing entertainment. Disputes were common enough, but disputes involving humans were still relatively novel. Humanity had joined the galactic community only 53 years ago, and while they'd integrated reasonably well, they still had that new species energy that made them unpredictable. Raxith's expression shifted to something between amusement and contempt. "You've been tracking him for 6 days? I've been a licensed guild hunter for 12 years. You really think your 6 days matters?" Guild regulations say prior tracking establishes claim priority regardless of hunter tenure. She said it like reading from a manual, which she probably was mentally. "My counterclaim is legitimate. We follow protocol or we don't. Here's some protocol for you." Raxith leaned down, using his full height advantage for intimidation. Human hunters are cute. Real adorable how your species thinks 50 years in the galaxy makes you competition for those of us who've been doing this since before your planet had FTL. But this is serious work for serious hunters. Go find some shoplifter bounty worth 300 credits and leave the real targets to professionals. The quiet around them had spread. Nearly every hunter in the guild hall was watching now, recognizing the setup for what it was. The human, her guild registration identified her as Kaine V, didn't react to the intimidation with fear or anger. She just studied Raxith like he was a math problem with a solution she was working out. "So, you're refusing my legitimate counterclaim?" she asked. "I'm giving you educational advice. Free of charge, because I'm generous like that. Then we follow dispute protocols." She turned toward the arbiter's station, raised her voice. "Filing formal dispute for bounty claim. Primary claimant Raxith, counterclaimant Kaine, requesting arbitration." The guild arbiter, a Velcothian named Syrinx, whose species specialized in neutral mediation because they literally couldn't experience emotions, emerged from his office with the enthusiasm of someone filling out paperwork. Formal dispute filed and acknowledged. Both parties have established guild standing. As per regulations, disputes must be resolved through sanctioned combat in the designated arena. No weapons. Fight continues until submission or incapacitation. Victor receives exclusive claim rights to the contested bounty. Do both parties accept these terms? "Accepted," Kaine said immediately. Raxith laughed, an unpleasant sound that translated poorly across species. "Oh, this is perfect. You actually want to fight me? You understand what happens in dispute combat? This isn't simulation training or your planet's sport fighting. This is actual." "I've read the regulations," Kaine interrupted. "Combat until submission or incapacitation. Medical intervention available but not guaranteed. Guild assumes no liability for injuries sustained. I understand the terms. Do you accept or decline?" Pride and practicality warred briefly in Raxith's mind. The practical approach was to let her have the bounty, find another target, avoid complications. But that would look like backing down from a human, and his reputation couldn't sustain that kind of damage. Plus, crushing her in combat would reinforce his dominance while providing entertainment for everyone watching. "Accepted," he said, showing all his teeth in what definitely wasn't a smile. "Try not to die too quickly. The crowd likes a show." Cyrix made notes on his datapad with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd arbitrated hundreds of these disputes. "Combat will commence in 1 standard hour. Both parties to the arena level. Betting windows are now open for guild members in good standing." The betting board activated immediately, displaying the matchup and odds. Raxith, 1.8, Kaine, 1.234. Someone at the bar actually whistled at those numbers. Kaine walked to the preparation area without acknowledging the odds, the crowd, or Raxith's continued commentary about how this was going to end. She found an empty bench, sat down, and began a stretching routine that looked more like physical therapy than combat preparation. What none of them knew, what wouldn't show up on any guild registration or public database, was that Vivian Kaine had spent 8 years in the Terran Expeditionary Force's Tactical Response Division before mustering out. The TRD specialized in what their recruitment materials called asymmetric engagement solutions, which was military speak for fighting things bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than humans by being smarter, faster, and more ruthlessly efficient. She'd spent those 8 years training in cross-species combat, learning alien anatomies the way medical students learned surgery, studying how different species moved, fought, and could be dismantled. The Thularians had been part of that curriculum. Aggressive, powerful, overconfident. The instructors called them textbook examples of how natural advantages create predictable vulnerabilities. After military service, she'd spent 3 years as a private security contractor before discovering that bounty hunting paid better and involved less corporate bureaucracy. She'd been licensed with the guild for 18 months, claimed 37 bounties, and maintained a perfect record specifically by avoiding disputes with established hunters. Until now. Until Thrace. Until she'd spent 6 days tracking the target, gathering intelligence, positioning herself for the capture, only to have some territorial predator claim it because he walked into a guild hall first. The professional approach was to let it go, find another bounty, maintain her steady income stream. The practical approach was to avoid fighting a Thularian who outweighed her by 300 pounds and had natural weapons that could kill her in seconds. But 8 years of military service had taught her that sometimes the practical approach was admitting defeat before the fight started. And she'd never been particularly good at admitting defeat. The preparation hour passed with Raxith working the crowd, taking drinks, accepting congratulations on his impending victory. Kaine spent it stretching, reviewing mental notes on Thularian anatomy, and drinking water. Just water. Not even the good stuff that helped with pre-fight nerves. The arena occupied the guild hall's lower level, a circular space 30 meters in diameter with reinforced walls and medical stations positioned at strategic points. The floor was textured polymer, designed to provide traction without being abrasive. Energy barriers hummed at low frequency, maintaining environmental controls while preventing the more energetic attacks from affecting spectators. The crowd filled the observation areas with the energy of people who'd bet money and wanted entertainment for their investment. Nearly every hunter in the building had descended to watch. Joined by station residents who'd heard about the matchup and wanted to see either an upset or a cautionary tale about overconfidence, Raxith entered the arena to substantial approval, all four arms raised, his venomous spines extending in a display that made several species unconsciously step back. He was giving them the show they wanted, building the narrative of the unstoppable predator about to teach a lesson in humility. Kaine entered from the opposite entrance without ceremony, rolling her shoulders once, adjusting her stance, waiting. Syrinx floated to the arena center on anti-grav, his emotionless voice cutting through the crowd noise. Guild dispute combat. Claimant Raxith versus counter-claimant Kaine. No weapons permitted. Combat continues until submission, incapacitation, or referee intervention. Lethal outcomes are discouraged through financial penalties, but not prohibited. Medical teams standing by. Both parties confirm understanding. Confirmed, Raxith said, still playing to the crowd. Confirmed, Kaine said to the referee. Combat begins. Raxith's opening strategy was textbook Thularian aggression. Close distance fast, establish physical dominance, overwhelm with superior strength and reach. He crossed the space in 4 massive strides, all 4 arms already positioning for a combination attack that would test her defenses, force her into a defensive position, and set up the finishing strikes. His first punch was aimed at her center mass with enough force to crack ribs. It hit nothing but air because she wasn't there anymore. She'd shifted her weight and angled left. Minimal movement, just enough to make his fist pass where her torso had been a fraction of a second earlier. His second arm came around in a sweeping hook. She ducked under it, already inside his reach, her hand snapping out to strike his wrist as his third arm began its attack. The strike didn't do damage, but it disrupted his timing, made his third punch arrive slightly off target. Raxith's combat instincts registered confusion. Humans were supposed to be middle tier for reflexes, nothing spectacular. The guild databases confirmed this. Every assessment agreed. But this level of defensive awareness suggested either cybernetic enhancement or combat experience measuring in decades. He adjusted his approach, added feints and timing variations, tested her ability to read complex attack patterns. She read them anyway. Not through superior speed, she clearly wasn't faster than him, but through recognition. Like she'd seen these combinations before and knew what was coming next. Because she had. Thularian combat doctrine was aggressive and effective, but it was also taught systematically across their military, which meant it was predictable if you'd studied it. Kaine had spent 3 weeks in military training doing nothing but sparring against Thularian combat instructors, learning their patterns, understanding how their forearm combinations worked, recognizing the tells that telegraphed their strikes. She'd turned them into an equation she could solve. Raxith committed to a full assault, all 4 arms working in concert, the combination that had ended 20 of his previous disputes. Upper right leading with a jab, lower left following with a body blow, upper left coming across with a hook, lower right driving up in an uppercut. It was practiced, powerful, and would overwhelm most defensive strategies through sheer volume. Kaine slipped the jab, redirected the body blow, ducked the hook, and then struck the nerve cluster at the base of Raxith's lower right shoulder. The exact spot where Thularian neural pathways concentrated, controlling their lower arm's fine motor functions. His lower right arm went numb immediately. Not paralyzed, not injured, just temporarily offline as his nervous system rebooted that connection. 3 arms instead of 4. 75% capability instead of 100. The crowd's noise changed pitch from entertained to confused. Raxith's expression cycled through surprise, realization, and rage. He compensated immediately, adding more power to his remaining arms, adjusting his combinations to work with 3 limbs instead of 4, and walked directly into the trap. Because now Kaine knew exactly where his attacks were coming from. 3 arms instead of 4 meant fewer angles, fewer options, more predictable patterns. She went to work with the clinical efficiency of someone executing a practiced procedure. A palm strike to his elbow that hyperextended the joint without breaking it. A low kick to his lead knee that disrupted his stance. When he swung with his upper left arm, she caught it, used his momentum against him, and delivered a knee strike to his midsection that drove air from his lungs. Thularians were tough. Their hide was naturally armored, their pain tolerance was high, their combat endurance was legendary. But toughness didn't help when someone systematically removed your structural advantages. Kaine struck his other lower shoulder, targeting the matching nerve cluster. His lower left arm joined its counterpart in temporary numbness. 2 arms down, 50% capability. Raxith roared, a sound that combined fury with the first edge of genuine concern. He'd been in hard fights before, brutal ones. Fights where he'd taken damage and paid prices. But he'd never been in a fight where someone was methodically dismantling his advantages while he struggled to land a single solid hit. He charged with pure aggression, accepted that he was down 2 arms, decided to end this through overwhelming violence with what remained. His venomous spines extended fully, the neurotoxin coating them glistening under the arena lights. Kaine had been waiting for the spines. Thularians always deployed them when frustrated, when their primary strategies failed, when pride demanded escalation. It was predictable. It was also their biggest vulnerability because extended spines compromised their arm flexibility. She went low, swept his front leg, struck his knee at the precise angle to compromise his balance. Thularian legs were built for forward power, not lateral stability. They were top-heavy by design, which made them devastating in a charge but vulnerable to sweeps. Raxith went down. Actually went down. His massive frame hit the arena floor with impact that registered on the station's seismic sensors. The crowd exploded into chaos. He rolled, tried to create distance, but she was already controlling his movement. Every time he tried to push up, she removed his structural support. Every time he tried to strike, she was positioned where his remaining arms couldn't reach. She applied pressure to joints, targeted nerve clusters, exploited the biomechanical weaknesses that her military instructors had drilled into her. It was a clinic, a brutal, efficient demonstration of what happened when natural advantages met technical expertise. "Submit," she said quietly, professionally. "Never." He bucked, twisted, managed to catch her jacket with one massive hand, pulled her close where his venomous spines could reach her. Kaine grabbed his wrist with both hands, manipulated it at an angle that made his grip strength irrelevant, and applied leverage that threatened to dislocate his shoulder. Thularian's shoulders were powerful, but they had limited rotation ranges. Push them past those ranges, and physics didn't care how strong you were. "Submit." Raxith's pride warred with his pain receptors and his rapidly developing understanding that continuing this fight meant serious injury. His career couldn't survive losing to a human, but it definitely couldn't survive a shattered shoulder either. "I yield." The words came out strangled, humiliated, but they came out. Kaine released him immediately, backed away with her hands visible, maintaining professional courtesy to the end. Cyrix's emotionless voice cut through the arena noise. "Submission acknowledged. Victor, Kaine. Exclusive claim rights to bounty target Kelvin Thrace awarded to counterclaimant Kaine. Medical teams to the arena floor. The crowd's reaction split three ways. Those who'd bet on the upset and were celebrating, those who'd bet on Raxith and were demanding recounts, and those who were simply trying to process what they'd witnessed. Raxith lay on the arena floor, his arms slowly regaining function as the nerve disruptions faded, breathing hard, staring at the ceiling while medical technicians checked him for serious injuries. His body would recover within hours. His reputation would take considerably longer. Kaine accepted her official claim credentials from Cyrix, nodded once, and headed for the preparation area to collect her belongings. She moved through the crowd, without acknowledging the stares, the questions, the sudden interest from hunters who 5 minutes ago had been laughing at her odds. The betting payouts generated their own chaos. Several hunters who'd placed long-shot bets on Kaine were now substantially wealthier. The guild's bookmakers scrambled to process payouts while simultaneously trying to understand how their odds had been so catastrophically wrong. Information started circulating within minutes. Someone accessed Kaine's full background file, the parts that required elevated clearance to view. Her military service, her specialized training, her actual combat record that went far beyond the 37 guild bounties she'd claimed. Turned out humanity's military had spent the last 50 years studying every species they might potentially fight, developing tactical doctrines specifically for defeating physically superior opponents through technical expertise. Turned out they were very good at it. Turned out they'd been training soldiers like Kaine to be very good at it too. The footage of the fight spread across guild networks faster than interstellar communication should have allowed. Within hours, combat analysts were breaking down the match, highlighting specific techniques, noting the exact moments where Kaine had exploited Thularian physiological vulnerabilities that nobody had bothered to classify as vulnerabilities before. The guild implemented new verification protocols the next day. Mandatory disclosure of military combat training during registration. They didn't mention humans specifically, but everyone understood the subtext. Raxith remained in the guild hall's medical bay for 6 hours, not because he needed treatment, but because facing the aftermath required more courage than the fight had. When he finally emerged, his reputation had already shifted from unstoppable predator to that guy who lost to the human. His friends tried to be supportive. His competitors were less generous. The footage was already being used as training material by several species military academies as an example of what happened when you underestimated opponents based on physical appearance. Kaine left Obsidian Station 8 hours after the fight, her ship's fuel tanks full, her navigation computer programmed with Kelvin Thrace's current location, which she'd known for 3 days before Raxith even claimed the bounty. She'd filed her departure credentials with station control, paid her docking fees, and jumped out system without fanfare. She captured Thrace 17 hours later on a mining colony in the outer reaches. He tried to run, realized quickly that running was pointless, and surrendered with the resignation of someone who knew his luck had finally expired. The delivery to guild authorities was routine, the bounty payout processed without complications, and Kaine moved on to her next target. 85,000 credits covered 6 months of operating expenses, ship maintenance, and enough extra to upgrade her sensor suite. It was good money. Professional money, the kind that made bounty hunting viable as a long-term career. She didn't celebrate the victory over Raxith, didn't brag about it in guild halls, didn't even mention it in her personal logs beyond dispute resolved per guild protocols. Just another day's work, another problem solved, another example of preparation beating natural advantages. The bounty hunting community across multiple sectors began reassessing their understanding of human capabilities. Some hunters started studying human combat methods. trying to understand the technical sophistication that had let someone half Raxith's size defeat him decisively. Others simply made mental notes to avoid disputes with human hunters, recognizing that the new species might be more dangerous than their unimpressive physical stats suggested. Raxith fought again 4 weeks later. Won against a Corvin hunter who relied on speed over technique. But his style had changed. He protected angles he'd never worried about before, maintained defensive awareness even during offensive combinations, treated every opponent as a potential threat regardless of their appearance. The footage of his loss had taught him something valuable, even if the lesson had been expensive. The galaxy was full of species with different advantages, different training, different approaches to combat. Underestimating opponents based on physical assessment was how careers ended and bodies accumulated injuries. 3 months later, Kaine received a message through guild channels. Text only, sender identified as Raxith. It was brief, almost awkward. Your technique was superior. Your preparation exceeded mine. This was a valuable lesson delivered at fair cost. If you're interested in sharing training methodology, I would compensate appropriately. Professional inquiry only. She didn't respond immediately, but she saved the message. Not for sentimental reasons, sentiment wasn't profitable, but because Raxith represented specific physical parameters and combat capabilities. Fighting him again after he'd adapted would be an interesting challenge. Besides, consulting work paid well and bounty hunting had slow periods. Might as well diversify income streams. The galaxy continued its complicated dance of commerce, conflict, and coexistence. The guild maintained its profitable middle position between law enforcement and criminal enterprise. Hunters continued tracking bounties, fighting disputes, accumulating credits and scars in roughly equal measure. But the conversation shifted slightly. Human hunters started appearing more frequently in guild halls across multiple sectors. Some were successful, some weren't. But they all fought with a level of technical sophistication that suggested systematic training rather than natural talent. And gradually, other species began to understand that humanity's contribution to galactic civilization wasn't going to be superior technology or diplomatic genius or artistic brilliance. It was going to be the uncomfortable reminder that evolution wasn't destiny, that physical advantages could be neutralized through study and technique, and that underestimating humans because they were new was the fastest way to learn painful lessons. The Bounty Guild had been built on the principle that might made right, that physical superiority determined outcomes, that the strongest hunters claimed the best bounties. It was a system that worked beautifully for species with natural combat advantages. Right up until someone showed up with a calculator, a military combat manual, and the audacity to solve predators like mathematical equations. Raxith had learned that lesson in front of 200 witnesses and countless remote viewers. His pride had recovered. His reputation had adjusted. His bank account had suffered from lost betting odds and reduced intimidation factor. But he'd learned. And learning, however painful, was how professionals survived in a profession where mistakes were frequently fatal. Kaine collected 3 more bounties over the next month, avoided 2 disputes through reputation alone, and accidentally started a trend of human bounty hunters studying alien combat extensively before accepting jobs. It wasn't intentional, she was just doing her job professionally. But apparently professionalism was contagious. The galaxy was vast, complicated, and full of species that had evolved in ways that gave them specific advantages. Humanity's advantage wasn't strength or speed or natural weapons. It was the stubborn refusal to accept that advantages were permanent, the systematic approach to solving problems regardless of how impossible they seemed. and the particular brand of audacity that made them challenge 9-foot venomous predators to sanctioned combat because they'd studied the math and liked their odds. Progress, ladies and gentlemen. Witness it in all its calculated, technically proficient, occasionally hilarious glory. The universe was learning about humans one painful lesson at a time. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was teaching lessons to those who underestimated them. Usually in front of large betting audiences. Usually with precision that made it look easy. Usually while remaining completely unfazed by the chaos they'd just created. Just another day in the life of humanity, making the galaxy recalculate its assumptions one fight at a time.